It is just a huge honor today to be podcast interviewing Michelle Rhodes and her sidekick, Denise Tobin, otherwise known as Batman and Robin. Michelle has been the director at God's Garden since fall of 2015. She came to God's Garden with over 12 years of experience working in early childhood education. She has a PhD in early childhood education, a master's degree in child development, and a bachelor's degree in psychology. That is amazing. Michelle has many years of experience teaching, training, and mentoring early childhood professionals. Michelle has knowledge of adult learning styles, Arizona early childhood education regulations, theories of early childhood development and education, curriculum development, child guidance, assessment, standards, and guidelines for best practices of high-quality programs. Michelle has taught and worked with diverse young children and their families, including preschool-age children and children with autism for over 12 years. She has not only worked directly with children in licensed preschool centers, but she has also worked with children and their families in various community settings, including Leaps and Bounds, a family interactive kindergarten readiness program for families with preschool-age children. Grounded in Piaget's theory of constructivism, she believes that both children and adults learn by doing, and thus hands-on experiences are crucial to student learning and growth. Thus, her area of focus includes an emergent, play-based, child-centered curriculum. Above all, she is an advocate for children and families. She strives to improve and make a difference in the lives of young children and their families by preparing professionals to work with young children and their families. She is a mother of two daughters, Josephine, 12, and Lola, 9. Michelle loves to spend time with her family, and she has a passion for spending time outdoors, jogging, biking, hiking, swimming, roller skating, cycling. And Denise Tobin, God's Garden Director's Assistant. She has a bachelor's degree in elementary education and a master's degree in early childhood education. Her interests or hobbies are shopping, reading, traveling, and spending time with family. I think I'm going to hang out with her. And years ago, she's been there 2 years. My God, you guys are so highly educated. And man, what a difference when I was a child. You know, I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and big Catholic family. And back then, every Catholic's mother, you'd always hear them say, children should be seen, not heard. Go out and play. It was just like, get out of my house. And you know what? You heard so many victim things like, you know, I got 7 kids. I can't handle this. Get out of the house. Go play. And now it's like this kid is now front and center stage. So how did you get interested? I mean, why did you get 3 advanced degrees in children as opposed to, you know, engineering?
It's a good question. I was just always intrigued by understanding how children's minds worked and helping to better their lives. Lots of children don't have the resources that they need. Parents are meeting their needs at home, and I just really want to make a difference. I've always wanted to make a difference. And I enjoy teaching. I enjoy working with parents and adults and helping them become better educators. So I like doing the training. So it's highly enjoyable for me.
So in the 12 years of doing this, was our generation better at raising our kids than the ones that raised the baby boomers? I mean, are we getting better?
We are getting better, yes.
We are getting
definitely.
better?
We actually joke about that. Hopefully in the next generation and maybe the next one after that, our kids will be doing really great. Yeah.
Yeah, because, you know, you read that basically the scientists think, the anthropologists think humans are 2 million years old. And 100 billion have come and gone, and there's 7.5 billion now. So 7.5% of all the humans that ever lived are alive now. But imagine how bad it must have been 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Could you imagine being a child 1 million years ago?
Yeah.
I mean, you're living in a cave, wandering around, and probably the parent thought they were great if you just weren't eaten by a woolly mammoth.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I have a concern of mine. I tried to take my the iPad away from Emma, who you saw the other day, just a minute ago, who's 2. She hung on to that like it was, you know, like I was stealing her baby or her heart or her leg. I mean, she fought with everything. And then you read these articles that a lot of these Google executives are sending their kids to non-technology schools because they don't let their kid have a smartphone. And then they asked them, I saw TED Talks on this, and I said, why? And he says, because we're designing this for being addictive. and it's like a cigarette or a coffee. I mean, so it concerns me that I literally lifted Emma off the ground while she was still hanging onto the iPad, and Google execs don't want their kids. So what do you think of? Is this involved in your curriculum?
No.
Are you guys on iPads?
No.
What are your thoughts on all that?
Children learn best by playing, by being in the moment, being present in the moment, playing with toys, with other children, talking, conversations. The relationship, the connection between two children or a child and an adult is more important than anything else. So what happens when you bring in an iPad or some sort of electronic device is the child is now just attuned to this one device. And they've lost this interaction, this connection with other people. And that's where most of their learning comes from, is those interactions. So when you take that away, what's happening? Well, we know it interrupts their frontal lobe development. And so this is where children learn to control, self-control. Impulse control happens here in your frontal lobe. So the iPhone, the iPad, lessens someone's attention span, their ability to concentrate. So there's new articles, new research coming out that's saying that they don't recommend children under age 2 using any kind of electronic device. TV is not recommended for children 2 years and under. So it's a lot to think about, right? Because kids all around us are using these iPads, and lots of people think it's good for them because it's teaching them skills. But they can learn those skills in better ways and other ways, in relationships, connections. So sitting down and playing a board game, or playing cards, or playing, even just like Barbies or blocks and dolls where you have conversations, much more valuable, especially the younger the children are.
At 55 years old, when I went to college, I was so dumb. I thought if you got A's in calculus and physics and geometry, you'd have the keys to the universe. But at 55 years old, I realized that I never used any of that. I mean, I can't imagine how many 10,000 hours I spent in the library studying geometry, calculus, algebra, physics. Never used any of it. But the people who own the universe are the best in interpersonal relationships in the sandbox. I mean, it just seems like I'd rather give a kid amazing people skills than amazing math skills.
So children that are competent in social and emotional skills, that's people skills, getting along with others, solving conflicts, asking for help, asking questions, can have attention spans. Those are the children that do well in school. They make friends, they make long-lasting relationships, and they go on to be successful in college and beyond, are able to get a job, sustain a job, take care of their families. The ones that have good social and emotional skills. They're able to relate to others, to solve problems. Conflict resolution is a huge issue. It's very hard for young children to learn how to solve problems. They can't do that if they don't have experiences to learn how to do that. They need to have arguments. They need to engage in discussions with other children and with teachers, and they need to be shown how to solve those problems. And if they're on the iPad, that's not happening. They're just sitting over there working on the iPad. There's no conversation. There's no play going on. So they're not learning those skills.
You know what? Every one of my friends, well, probably 90% of my friends are dentists, right? and for 30 years, if I ever ask, you're ever at a dinner with 4 dentists, you say, what's your biggest problem? What keeps you up at night? You would think it'd be root canals, implants, bone graft. Never. It's always staff. It's always HR. It's always my assistant and my hygienist don't get along. I mean, and then if it's not the staff, then it's a patient, an irrational patient. Yeah. But you would think a dentist's main stress would be, root canals and bone grafting. That's the least of their problems. Mm-hmm. It's always HR.
Yeah, and that was a huge learning curve for me too, is figuring out how to help my teachers solve problems, how to work together, solve conflict as adults, because it starts when you're young. You learn how to solve conflicts when you're young, and if you weren't shown how to do that in positive ways, then as adults, you struggle with that. It's hard. So that has definitely been the hardest thing for me to learn, is how to help my staff get along with each other and how to help children that are struggling with those skills. We have children that come in that that come from stressful situations that are going through, parents are going through divorce, death in the family, a parent that's just absent, that left when the child was really young, and these children are affected deeply by that, and they come in, and sometimes they're aggressive, sometimes they're just emotionally distant, and we stress over that kind of thing. We're always constantly coming together and brainstorming ideas on how we can get through to these children and help them gain the skills that they need so that they can get along with other children.
Some of the most bizarre conversations I ever had in my life last 30 years has been with police officers in my practice. And the stories they tell you people drive down the street, they don't know what's going on behind these closed doors. Between substance abuse, and we only care about Ahwatukee, we don't care about Chandler or Tempe or Maricopa, but ever since they came out with 911, the number one call from every city, state, across country is domestic violence. You would have thought, I thought when they rolled out 911 it'd be, grandpa's having a heart attack, someone wrecked their car. Man, number one is violence. That's just bizarre.
And you think Ahwatukee, that's not going to happen out here.
Yeah, that'd be like Chandler. You'd expect that in Chandler and Gilbert.
Right? You tend to think that, that it just doesn't happen out here, but it does. We have needs. We have needs. Our families have needs too. And maybe it doesn't happen as often, or maybe you don't hear about it. Maybe you don't think it's happening, but it does. And so our children need help too. And we have very good schools out here in Ahwatukee, and we still have children that are troubled, but less than high-risk areas. Downtown Phoenix is much different than it is here in Ahwatukee, but we still have children that have needs. But our teachers don't always necessarily know, they don't necessarily have the resources to know what to do with these children, because we experience it a lot less, but there definitely is the need.
Yeah, and it's funny. Most Americans don't realize that the downtowns of every city in Asia, Africa, and Europe is the most vibrant part. Downtown London, Denmark, Copenhagen, all these downtowns are amazing, but they don't realize that America has the worst downtowns because they subsidize the car. Your roads and bridges are paid with these big highway bills out of Washington, D.C., and it's the worst system in the world. All the other countries, when you go buy gas, your local city, for all the roads, bridges, construction, is put in that gas bill. So our gas is $2 a gallon, while theirs is $8 a gallon. That makes them drive less. So they start thinking, well, $8 a gallon, I commute an hour from the foothills of downtown Phoenix. That's $10,000 a year. My wife works right next to me. That's $20,000 a year. We're going to move downtown. And if they would cancel that stupid federal highway program bills and have each city and state do their own and fund it all through the gas, because what you're doing is you're subsidizing cars. You're subsidizing, so someone who doesn't drive pays federal taxes, and then that builds roads and bridges. So what it does, it moves your population back downtown. We'd have the coolest town in the world if gas was $8 a gallon and the other 6 did all the funding for all stuff. I want to ask you another thing. When I said HR skills, getting along, you caught me off guard when you said, and asking for help. I didn't even put that in the same category. I was like, where did that come from? And I realized that dentistry had a bizarre deal that 30 years ago, we all knew that women had 80% of all the TMJs and all the migraines and all that. So everybody in the research community was chasing down estrogen. They thought, well, how does estrogen affect TMJ? But what they found out decades later was that the men and women had it equally. It just men don't ask for help. And I saw that when I was little. We tell you how times change. I always, when I listen to these baby issues, I always think back half century ago. I remember mom and dad and me and my 5 sisters got in the back of the station wagon and drove from Wichita, Kansas to Disneyland. And we sat back there playing Monopoly. We didn't have car seats and seat belts and all this crazy stuff. But Dad got so lost in L.A. and he wouldn't stop and ask for help. And my mom finally, I never saw my mom do that before. She just unloaded on him until he stopped at a gas station and found Disneyland. But women live, men are about 74 years old. Women are almost at 80. So you guys live 5 years longer than us, and one of the big reasons is like you talk to my emergency room physicians, like a man will pass out a Safeway, and they'll take him in there. He has ulcerative colitis, and the docs say, "Well, what does your stools look like?" And they go, "Well, they've been black water for a year." It's like, black water for a year? See, a woman, after 3 days of black water runs, would raise her hand and say, "I don't think my stools should be black water." But a man, he has to do it till he passes out at Safeway, and then he had to have 2 feet of his colon taken out. So the question is gender biases. I was raised with 5 sisters, and I was prepared for that. And I should have had 4 daughters, but I had 4 boys. I was not prepared for that because I played Barbie dolls every day till I was 12, and then gender biases. Are boys and girls born differently, or do we make them differently?
That is a good question. It's both. It's both. And there's been a lot of research done on it, lots of studies. If you give children gender-neutral toys like a microphone, something like this, and who's going to play with it, both children are more likely to play with something that's gender-neutral than something that's like pink or something that's blue, a girl's versus a boy's. It's both, but there are definitely stereotypes, and it starts very young, from the minute that child is born, even in the womb. Because if we know it's a girl, we know the gender when it's in the womb, we start to treat the child differently. And from the minute they're born, we do the same thing. So it's okay for girls to cry more often than it is for boys to cry. But I see more and more in the classrooms where the teachers are very purposeful in creating gender-neutral classrooms, where boys are wearing dresses during free choice play, during dramatic play. And it's not discouraged. Boys are not being made fun of for that anymore. It's very different than it was probably during your generation. So we are very conscious of it and trying to make it to encourage boys to develop more empathy, compassion, and helping girls be stronger and braver. And those typically were not as focused on in those genders. So we're working on it. We're working to make differences, but it takes time. And you're talking about, we can only do so much in the classroom, and we can encourage parents to do the same, but parents come with their own backgrounds, their own experiences, their own biases, and they have certain expectations. Sometimes parents will say, I don't want my son wearing a dress for dress up, and that's difficult. Sometimes that is difficult.
A lot of people are very hard on the United States, but I've had the fortunate luck to lecture to dentists in 50 countries. Like Ryan and I, in the last year, we lectured in Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, London, Paris. We were in 5 continents last year, and it's amazing. Like, you'll go to great civilizations like Brazil and Indonesia, and you'll be eating with the dentist, and he'll say, "Oh, my son, he's so smart. When he grows up, he's going to be a dentist. And then my beautiful daughter, she's so beautiful. When she gets big, I think she could marry a dentist." And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Mm-hmm. Whoa. How come he can be a dentist, right, but she's so pretty, she's going to marry a dentist? And these are intelligent families in Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. And you're like, how does... And Saudi Arabia just allowed women to drive a car. Mm-hmm. It's... But back to that dress thing. I went to... So there's 2 schools of thought on men wearing dresses. One school, my psychiatrist friends, they say that it's not politically correct to say this, but they compare transgender to anorexia nervosa. If you look in the mirror and you see a big fat slob and everyone else sees a skeleton, you have a body dysmorphic image. Mm-hmm. So if you're a man and you look in the mirror naked and you don't identify with your genitalia, and you want to have a doctor surgically remove it, they say, no, don't surgically remove it. These guys have a 40% suicide rate. This is a mind disease. So quit, it'd be like, what if I just walked around to everybody and said, I'm sorry, I'm a giraffe. And quit calling me a human and quit talking to me, giraffes don't talk. I want everybody just to be a part of the play that I'm a giraffe because I've decided that. Then other people say, no, that's not true. They got a woman brain and a male genitalia, and they want their genitalia to match your brain. So when you see like Caitlin, do you think that's a mental disorder, or do you think that's
That's way beyond.
Oh, come on, you're a PhD. You're a PhD.
Denise, you want to answer that one?
I mean, where do you side towards more? Do you think it's like anorexia nervosa, or do you think they got mismatched parts?
I think it's way more complex than that.
Way more.
I think that each person is their own unique person, and I don't think I want to say more. I think it's way more complex.
Well, what would you do if you
I think
had
it's
a
very
5-year-old
common
child?
for young boys to want to dress up in dresses. They're just at that age. They're so young. It's before they have any physical attraction for any sex, the opposite or the same. They don't really understand yet. They're too young. Their brains aren't capable of making those kinds of connections yet. It's not till they get older. But I think there are some children that they're born that way, and they may be gay, and they know from the beginning, and I think it's way more complex than we understand. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
What do you think, Denise?
Well, just like you're talking about, raising with gender stereotypes, I think, there's a big belief right now that, with the gender fluid, ideals and things. I think sometimes we're confusing our kids if we try to make things too neutral. Women are women, and there's certain personality traits and things that, make you a woman, and same with men. And I think if you try to eliminate all of that, then it almost gets too confusing. And, I just read something on, I think it was, Angelina Jolie and Pink are just trying to raise their kids to be just completely gender neutral, like whatever, they're not identifying boy or girl, and I think that makes it into more of a mental issue than I think it's really confusing for kids. But like you were saying, when our little ones that are 3 and 4 and 5 and they're playing dress up and the boys are getting dolls and putting dresses on, I don't think that's a mental issue. It's like, oh, that's a sparkly dress that I want to put on and for fun, and they're just acting out different roles. And
those are really good roles for them to be acting out, too, because we want our fathers and our husbands to be able to make connections with their sons and their daughters. We want them to hold them and hug them and be emotionally healthy. So those are good. Those are actually really good experiences for boys. And in a lot of families, they don't allow that because they want their boys to grow up and to be strong. But we want our fathers to be good fathers and to be there for their children and to be around and to be present. And so those are really important skills for our sons. And same thing for our daughters. We want them to grow up to be scientists. We want them to be mechanics. We want them to be able to be in the field that they weren't in 30 years ago. We want them to do that. And if they don't have that exposure and we don't encourage it, then they're going to shy away from that. There's a lot that they can gain from that.
I decided to not have any children, and my 4 boys are taking it very hard. And so let's give them a. I want to. What are my homies going to find at your godsgarden.com? And give them a visual where you're at. So if you get off I-10, go down Chandler, then you enter the foothills. You go right by the foothill sign. Then you go down, and you're right there on the right past. To tell them where you are. We are off of
We're basically between 24th Street and Desert Foothills Parkway on Liberty. So if you take Chandler Boulevard past where it becomes Ray, and you take Chandler out farther, then you turn on 24th Street.
Which is the first light.
It is the first light. And then there's the sign to Foothills right there. So you turn at that light and then turn right on Liberty. And it's a smaller street, but it's a pretty main street, and we are on the left-hand side. It is we are a ministry of Horizon Presbyterian Church, so we are part of the church. It's a small building. It's been there for around 30 years. It's been there for a long time. The
30 years. You know where the golf course is?
Mm-hmm.
You know the first house next to the golf course? The first house.
No.
Well, when you pull into the golf course, there's the golf course. The first house there, that's where I lived for 20 years. That's where all my babies were born. Yeah.
So we're close by there. Yeah.
And it's been there. It's been really 30 years.
The preschool's been there
Holy
since
moly.
2000, so this is our 17th year.
So what do you offer there? If they go to godsgarden.com, what are they going to find on your website, and what do you actually do? What is your?
We offer preschool for children ages 2 through 5. We offer part-time care, so it's not your typical child care center. It's preschool. The 2-year-old program for toddlers is a 3-hour a day program. It's either 2 days or 3 days or even 5 days if parents wanted to do that. And we help potty train their children. We work with them, and then we offer for 3-year-olds and 4 and 5-year-olds. And again, it's part-time, so we're not open from 6 to 6. It's a faith-based program, so it's a Christian program. We embed stories from the Bible into our program. There's prayer. We focus on teaching good values, and themes are integrated into the classroom. And we go to chapel twice a month, and those themes are carried out into chapel and into the classroom. And it's very play-based. Children learn through play, so they have to have time for play. And so a good portion of our day, children are able to choose centers to play in the classroom. And we offer some after-school programs and some enrichment programs like Spanish. And we're partnering with My Gym, Ahwatukee, because they have new owners. They were going to close, and one of our families purchased My Gym. And they are actually they're actually both doctors, and this is a new.
Where's My Gym at?
It is on Chandler, and it's real close to 40th Street. It's right next to CK's.
Yeah,
it's small, but it's right in there. So
we are
partnering with them, and they're going to do one of our enrichment programs, and
send them down here.
Okay.
Send them down here.
I will.
So the 2-year-olds have their program.
Correct.
But did you say the 3, 4, and 5 are all together?
No, the 3s. Well, we have a 3s program and a 4s program, but they're 3 and 4-year-olds in 3s, and they're 4 and 5-year-olds in the 4s program. Mm-hmm.
Because isn't 5 kindergarten?
5 and 6 is kindergarten.
6 is. I thought 6 was first grade.
6 and 7 is first grade. It depends on their birthday. So you're going to have some 5-year-olds that are starting kindergarten. You're going to have some that are closer to 6 or 6 when they're starting kindergarten. Yeah, so we have some 5-year-olds.
So is it fair to say then it's a preschool program, but you also have kindergarten?
Well, we actually are hoping to start a kindergarten next year. So we are working on that, so then we could potentially have 5 and 6-year-olds there.
Do you sometimes wonder if you're overqualified to teach preschool since you have a PhD and a master's degree? You ever say to yourself, did I really need to become a doctor to teach this 3-year-old?
No, I did not. But I really love what I do. I really enjoy it. I've taught, at colleges. I've taught at ASU, Glendale Community College, Mesa Community College, and I love teaching adults. I really enjoy that, and I still do that at my center because I do professional development for my teachers. So I engage in that part. But what was missing for me was working with the children, and so I get both of those worlds, the best of both worlds. I get to be with the children, and I get to work with the adults, and I build relationships. So I know all my families. I know all the children's names. We work to get to know them. I think that's one of the most special things about God's Garden is that we are a family, we're a community, and it's very loving. When you drop your child off there, you're going to feel safe knowing your child is going to be held and they're going to be loved. The teachers love the children. They pay attention if they're not feeling well. We call home and say, hey, your child's got a fever, or they're not feeling well today. I think you should come get them. It's very loving.
And how much is this program?
It runs between $230 up to $420, depending on the age.
$230 to $420 a month.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And let's talk about faith-based because I grew up in a Catholic family. Mm-hmm. We went to mass 7 days a week. I mean, my mom had a rule: you had to be bleeding in 2 different places to skip mass. And so you could be there, coughing viruses and. Legionnaires' disease and hepatitis, you wouldn't care. You had to be bleeding. And my 2 oldest sisters, straight out of high school, went straight into the Catholic nunnery. I mean, I've been a dentist for 30 years. My older sister Sister Ann's been a nun for 35 years. But it seems like that generation was very almost like strict. Bible's the law, and it seems like the next generation of millennials more like, well, I don't get into the can't eat shellfish and all these rules and law. They're kind of more spiritual. And so when you say faith-based, are you kind of more non-denomination spiritual, or is it more structured? These are the rules, these are the laws. You know what I mean?
That's a really good question. So for us at God's Garden, we're a ministry of Horizon Presbyterian Church. With that said, what that means is that we're not Presbyterian. Our program isn't necessarily Presbyterian, but it's part of it because we go to chapel and we do have a Presbyterian pastor that leads our chapel. But we have a central theme, and that is God is center. So in our classroom, we teach our children about God and to love one another as God's children. So that is a central theme for our preschool program. But I wouldn't say that we're strict Presbyterians in the preschool. But we have
families that are Catholic, Mormon.
We do.
I mean, they come
I
from
know,
different.
that's the point I'm making. So I'm 55.
Mm-hmm.
So all my 55 to 75-year-old friends, like say they're LDS dentists, they're strict, they believe it all. They're all real strict. But when you look at everyone's children, more than half walked away from all the strict stuff, and now they're kind of more in just non-denominational Unitarian churches. They just they didn't like all the well, you know what I'm saying. It's gone from strict and rigorous and almost like a law, rules and laws, to more spiritual. And I think that trend. Do you see that trend?
I do. But we have quite a few families that are looking for something more than that now. So I've seen a shift, at least at God's Garden, where the families are looking for something more. They want to help.
So you think the pendulum's coming back?
For some families, I do.
Yeah,
I do.
interesting.
Because they feel like it's lacking. And so they want to help their children be better children and be good to others and be caring. And they believe that God is the center of that. And without God, that you can't have that. So we have a lot of families that have come because they are looking for a Christian program. But many of them are Catholic. We have many families that are Catholic.
You know what the number one religion is in the United States? Catholic. You know what the number two religion is in the United States? Ex-Catholic.
Interesting.
Isn't that amazing? Because there's 50 million Hispanics, and Central and South America is all Catholic. The Irish, that's what I'm 100% Irish. They were all Catholic. So the number one is Catholic, and then the number two is Catholic's children who said, I remember when I was in college that so many girls tell me, well, I can't go to Mass and pray to a God that says I'll go to hell for eternity if I use birth control. So they became Lutherans and Presbyterians. So it's a interesting thing. But so go back to Horizon. So you're right next to the Horizon Church in the same parking lot?
Yes. We're connected. We share the same. There are two buildings connected by a playground, and we use both buildings. So we use the chapel when we go to chapel, and that is in the church. And then two of our classrooms are actually in the church. So we use both buildings, and we are one. We are a ministry of that program. We would not exist without the church wanting to reach out to the community, and this is their way of doing so, is by having a preschool program.
So all your programs are Monday through Friday. Do you have anything on Saturday or Sunday?
No.
Okay, so it's a Monday through Friday.
Correct.
All your programs are Monday through Friday.
Correct.
And who's the minister? If you go to horizonchurch.com, who's the pastor there?
Pastor Joe Surin, and he's our interim pastor, and he's been there for over a year, and he will be on for another year. We're looking for I don't know what you would call it, an official pastor to take over.
Do you want me to call my two sisters that are nuns and have them apply? Come on, you're gender neutral. Does it have to be a boy?
No.
No? Okay, I'll
it does
call
not.
I've been trying to get my two sisters moved from Wichita to Phoenix. I got one of my 5 sisters that got out here.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get the other 4. But you know what? My mom, it's so funny because the church is her whole life. She could never leave Wichita. I mean, every friend she's ever had in the last 84 years has been in that church. You know, it's and that's why I like to get the pastors from Ahwatukee Uncensored. I want to get every one of them on, because when I look at the community, the pillars of a community are really churches and schools. I can't think of what the third leg would be. I mean, they don't need. Ahwatukee would be fine without Makayo's restaurant or KFC. Those are really
our community workers.
Our community workers,
like policemen, firemen.
Yeah, policemen,
hospitals.
keeping it safe. Yeah, fire. And the firemen, that's really changed from when we were little. I talked to my patients that are firemen. Only 10% of their calls have anything to do with fire. They're really ambulances.
Yeah.
You know, when we were little, you had the ambulance and the fire department. The fire department only went to fires, and the ambulance is out. Now the fire truck comes to your house when you have fire. So yeah, can you get the pastor to come down here?
I will definitely.
Because that's my whole goal is to make to take this amazing smartphone and give them a tool to make the communities better. So I want to ask you. Well, what questions should I be asking you that I'm not smart enough to be asking?
So even though we don't have a program on the weekend, we do have events occasionally throughout the year. And we have a big one coming up in February, Transportation Day. Have you ever been to Transportation Day? Have you ever heard of Transportation Day?
I have
not. So this is our 17th, our 18th, our 18th Transportation Day. And it's a big event. We have around 3,000 people come to the event, and we have all different kinds of transportation, fire truck, we have a helicopter, we have construction vehicles and trucks, and we have vendors that come down. We do big raffle prizes, and it's a fundraiser for our school, but it's a community event too, and it's been going on for years. So I used to go when my kids were little, before I even worked at God's Garden, and we're really excited about it. It's our 18th year.
What day is it?
February 24th.
Ryan, we need to put that in the note. Okay. February 24th. Is that a Saturday or Sunday?
It is a Saturday. It's in the
Saturday,
morning from
February
9 to 1. Entertainment. We have food. We bring in food trucks, and different vendors come in and bring different, boutiques and
like what kind of vendors?
Business.
Stuff you'd see like at an art festival or something?
Kind of like Festival of Lights. Do you guys go to Festival of Lights?
Yeah.
So it's similar as ours, is smaller, like a smaller scale Festival of Lights. So we do not have alcohol. We haven't gotten our church to get on board with that yet.
Yeah.
But we do bring in quite a variety of the food trucks, and that's fun. And last year we had a horse-drawn carriage, and people like the horse-drawn carriage, but it's fun. It's a fun time.
So what you guys have PhDs, you have master's degrees. If you were talking to someone right now and they just had a newborn baby, what are some of the low-hanging fruits to be a better parent? What is some of the things? Because what I always thought was weird is, like, I have to have a license to practice dentistry. I have to have a license to drive a car. Anybody can have a kid. Right. No license, no regulation. And I remember when I had my first boy, Eric, in 1989, me being, 9 years of college, my first reflex was to go to Barnes & Noble and find a book, Raising Boys by a PhD. Mm-hmm. And I said, it was a textbook. And I read that whole thing, and I thought to myself, damn, I'm so glad I brought that book. I mean, so many of those things they were talking about, I never even thought about. So if you're talking to a pregnant couple right now, and they're about to deliver a baby, or they just delivered a baby, what is some of the low-hanging fruit you could do to be a better parent?
The most important thing that I can think of is the interaction piece we were talking about earlier. It's really important to make time for your children, even if it's 15 minutes a day, right? You don't have a lot of time. You got to go to work all day. You've got to go grocery shopping. You've got to cook dinner. You need to make time where you're just focusing on that child. You got to make eye contact. You've got to ask questions, open-ended questions like, what are you building? What else can you make with it? And encourage them to think critically. And by asking questions that ask them to make comparisons and evaluations and assessment, and it's tricky. A lot of times we ask questions that are yes or no questions. They're not open-ended, and it just stops children from going further. Where could it go to? So it's reframing your mind to ask questions that are open-ended and just to play. Sit down on their level and just play with them. And when they're babies, holding them, looking at making a connection, that eye contact. They can only see about 10 to 12 inches away from their face when they're babies, and that's for a reason, so they can make a connection with their loved one. Because that bond is going to ensure that child lives. It's survival instinct. I need to make a connection. That's why they're so cute. Love me, and so we will take good care of them. But sometimes we get caught up in our lives, and our lives are much busier than ever before because we're connected to our smartphones and we checking our email throughout the day. Sometimes we're working from our phone throughout the day. I catch myself doing that when I go home. And you got to make time for your kids, that interaction piece. We're doing a lot less of that than we used to. And even when you were growing up and you were sent off to go play, you were playing with your friends and talking with your friends, making connections with your friends. You're having that interaction piece. And there's a lot less of that interaction piece now than there was before. And so that is the most important thing that I would tell families. What about you, Denise?
Yeah, I think that focusing on quality time, because we don't have a lot of the quantity, and giving your kids experiences where, right now we book our kids, they're at school all day, and then they come home and they go to soccer and they go to baseball, and their whole day is just structured and people telling them what to do all day long. They need that downtime. They need that freedom to be able to play, but it's not, again, just go to your room and go play by yourself. Like, there needs to be those interactions and those opportunities for them to problem solve and be social and ask questions and discover experiences and things like that. So if you don't have a lot of time, then make that time quality.
To me, it almost looks like I've lived in two different civilizations. Because when I was little, the kids all ran free and had to be at home when the street light came on. Mm-hmm. And your parents never knew. I mean, I don't know. My parents never helped us with our homework one time, and I don't know any of my friends that I grew up with. I mean, I couldn't even imagine my dad coming home from work and saying, "Hey, could you help me do my homework?" Mm-hmm. I mean, he would have thought I was a Martian. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up in this deal where, I mean, me and my friend, I mean, we'd be 8-10 blocks away from home at parks, and we would walk back to Blessed Sacrament and play on the swing sets for 4 hours, and then you just, when the street lights had come on, you had to be at home. That was the rule. And then the next generation, the millennials, called their parents helicopter parents, and they're just helicopter over every. It's so hard to say what's the better parenting style, because when there was no involvement with your parents and you just ran the streets wild, well, that generation landed on the moon and did a bunch of great things. Mm-hmm. And then the next generation, there's a helicopter parent flying over you, structuring your whole world and doing your homework. So where's the pendulum? Where should the pendulum be?
It's gonna keep swinging. It just does. It always has. I mean, the first nursery school was more about social and emotional skills, nurturing our children, and it swung, and it's swinging back again, and it's just going to constantly swing back and forth, and we're going to constantly be moving back and forth as we're growing as a culture. That's always going to happen. It's never going to stop changing. But we just have to keep focusing on making sure our children are getting their needs met, and in one way or another. And everything is always going to be changing. Like, for right now, that the idea of you asking your dad to help you with homework, the amount of homework has changed. It's different in schools. There is much more homework in schools than there ever has been before, because it's a good question. Why? Because they think it's going to prepare children to be more successful later on in life, and life is more demanding now. There's more competition to get to get a better job. Everyone goes to college. Most people go to college because you have to. If you want to get a job, there's so much competition that you have to go to college. And eventually, bachelor's isn't going to be good enough. Everyone's going to need a master's. It's much more competitive. Why did I get a PhD? It's a good question. Because with a master's, I wasn't competitive enough to get a job at a community college. I needed a PhD to get the job. So I went back and I got my PhD. Then after I got my PhD, I had a family. I had young children, and I'm like, hang on a second. I don't want to work. I want to be home with my children. But I have all this debt from getting all these degrees. I have to work, right? There are consequences for our actions, and it's much more demanding than it was before. So my kids come home, they have all this homework. I don't remember having homework like that. I don't remember having hours and hours of homework like that until I got into high school. But my children started getting homework in kindergarten. And is that necessary?
No.
No, it's not. There's no research. Not everyone's going to love this answer, but there's no research to show that homework actually helps children be more successful. There is a lot of research that shows that it can be detrimental because children are going to school all day, hours and hours, where they're just sitting in desks and they're learning to memorize, and then they're coming home and they're expected to sit longer to do homework on worksheets, and they're not being taught how to think critically. And that's the most important thing. We want our children to be innovators. We want them to be able to come up with new ideas. And if we teach them to just memorize, they're going to be yes men. They're just going to be able to answer the questions. They're going to be able to do it. It's going to be like robots. But if we want them to come up with new ideas to save our world and to make better choices, then we need to teach them to think critically. And we do that by teaching them to make comparisons, to assess, to evaluate, to brainstorm. And they do that by having access to hands-on interactive activities that ask questions. They learn to ask questions. They learn to work in groups. They learn to work with others to solve conflicts, to get along with others, to ask questions, and to not just accept an answer as being the right answer. We want to teach them to question it. So if you tell me it's blue, you don't want the child to just accept it. Why? Why is it blue? Tell me more. You want the child to question it. That's a good thing for children to question it, but it's hard to accept that always.
Well, I call this podcast Ahwatukee Uncensored. And I don't like talking about religion, sex, politics, or violence because they're so divisive. But whenever I talk to a teacher, chair side in the dental office, they all say the same thing. In the Constitution, it says that education is a state's right. And then Jimmy Carter started a Department of Education. And then George Bush started that No Child Left Behind. And these teachers say, all we do is create all this crap to fulfill federal requirements in D.C. And if someone came to D.C. and said, I'm going to shut down the Department of Education, all the teachers would say, yay, but all the people would say, oh my God, he's against education. So it's this catch-22 that if you want to close down the Department of Education, you're anti-school and education. But I think the teacher, like you said, downtown Phoenix was different than Ahwatukee. Well, the downtown Phoenix teacher should teach what her students need, and the Ahwatukee should teach.
We want our children to have the same opportunities. We don't want them to be treated the same. We want to acknowledge that they're individuals and they're different, but we want to provide them with the same opportunities. And the having a Department of Education has allowed us to do that, so that everyone has an opportunity. I think what happens is that when you're creating policy, it's difficult. And depending on how you interpret it, will determine how you set up your program. And you have to look at it with an open mind. And what are you really trying to get out of this? What's the ultimate goal? We want to educate our children so that they can go on to live productive lives. They can get a job, and they can sustain jobs, and they can provide for their families, and they can make enough money so that their children are provided with the same opportunities, and that they have choice. They have choices in the type of jobs that they choose, and that they're happy and they feel like their life is successful. It doesn't mean that we need to create programs that look the same or look a very particular way. We want them to be standardized because we want them to have equal opportunities. We want to make sure the children are learning something. So we created standards so that we can say these children should be learning these kinds of things. But it doesn't mean that the curriculum has to be taught in a very specific way. And sometimes the way people interpret it is very rigid, that it has to be just like this. It can only be taught just like this. But in reality, it does not. And there are a variety of different kinds of programs. There are Waldorf programs. There are project-based programs. There are all kinds of different programs. And as a parent, we have more opportunity than ever to choose the kind of program that we want our children to go to. So there's not just public school anymore. You know, there are lots of different private programs. My children go to a charter school. I really love our charter school. It's not exactly the same as the other public schools. It offers something slightly different, and that's what I like about it. And we have a lot of choice, and we have to educate our families so they understand that they are advocates for their children. And if they're not going to stand up for their children, who is? And we have to know what we're looking for. We know we want our children to think critically. We want them to be able to think beyond just yes and no. We want them to be able to make educated guesses and to come up with new ideas to help with global warming and help with all kinds of issues that we're encountering.
There's probably a lot of people listening that don't know what a charter school is.
Sure.
So you said charter school. Mm-hmm. That's a government school.
It is a public
but
school.
It's a public school. Explain what a charter school is.
It is a public school, but it follows a slightly different set of regulations than a typical public school. It may not have all the same things that a typical public school has. Like they may not have football, a football team, but they're gonna follow the same state guidelines. They're gonna use Common Core or the career readiness standards, but their program is going to look different. Each charter is unique, and they can incorporate whatever philosophy they believe in into their program. So my kids go to Horizon, and Horizon is in Ahwatukee, and
where's Horizon?
It's on Fry and 48th. And they embed the project approach into their program, and that project approach means that children learn about topics through an investigation. And they have time each day where they sit down in groups and they explore, they investigate by they had like a water wheel. They're learning about the water cycle and how precipitation, all that stuff. And they actually built a water cycle and this mechanism, and they poured the water through it and watched. And then they did a presentation on it, and it's very interactive and teaches them to think critically and to think beyond. That's what I like about the program. Each charter has their own philosophy, and there's a variety of different philosophies that can be embedded into the program. That's what makes them unique. And I don't know a lot about charters beyond that. I'm not an expert on charters, but they do, ask for funding. We do have funding, funding programs, just like other schools do. We have volleyball team, we have a basketball team, we have a baseball team, but we don't have football. So they don't always have everything that another school has.
You have soccer.
I don't think so. We do have softball.
So
there are some things that we don't have, like your typical
why it's volleyball,
public high school.
Volleyball, softball, what was the other one?
Baseball, basketball.
You know what those all have in common?
No.
Soccer is the number one sport in the world because it's lowest cost. Mm-hmm. All you need is a ball. Mm-hmm. When I was down in Nepal, Kathmandu, Nepal, New Delhi, it was so cute because those boys, their favorite soccer star, they would draw the number on their back with charcoal. Mm-hmm. They didn't have, all you need is a ball.
Right.
They just had tennis shoes and shorts. So you're never going to have ice hockey become number one sport because the world can't afford all these damn ice hockeys. So soccer's number one, but they use their head. Mm-hmm. And they're using it every day. You started the program about the frontal cortex and how it's changed by the iPad. And they're sitting there bouncing the ball in their head all day long. And that in America, football is the NFL. And they wear helmets and they're having all these concussion problems. And I find it very interesting that all my NFL patients won't let their kids play football. They're like, hell no. And then soccer, so volleyballs, the forearms and the hands, not their head. Softball, baseball, and I look at Central and South America. Ryan and I were lecturing in Tunisia during Tanzania during the last World Cup. It was so exciting. The most exhilarating evening I ever had was in a bar in Tanzania, Africa, watching the World Cup with all these Africans, because 2 African countries were in it. They were the most passionate fans I'd ever seen. But I was sitting there thinking that whole night, like, you know what the odds are you could tell Africa, soccer, we're no longer going to use our head. We're going to use our hands. I mean, you know what the chance you could do that is? 0.000. In fact, I think soccer is a bigger religion than Christianity. I mean, if you change some rule in the church, most of the people would say, okay, birth control, illegal, legal, whatever, but don't use your head, use your hands. Never going to fly. And that's what I'm seeing is that a lot of these
I don't know about the soccer for sure, I gotta tell you.
Well, yeah, but there's no football and no soccer because parents are educated to head injuries.
I don't know.
Yeah, and they're so I think
football's big at
Desert Vista.
Desert Vista. Yeah.
Well, it's big now because when you're a freshman, 14, 15, 16, 17, or 15, 16, 17, 18, they started learning that skill when they were 5. Mm-hmm. But you go to the entry level now at 5, and they're gone. I mean, there's hardly any interest in football for 5 and 6 and 7 years. So 15 years down the road, you're going to go to Desert Vista, and you're not going to have all these boys trying out for football, then playing it for 15 years because their mother
That'd be an interesting
didn't
study.
let them.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll be getting there saying, I want to join the volleyball team. I want to join track and field. I want to baseball, softball. And then the football coach going, where's all my players? So when a country decides they want to get gold medals in the Olympics, they have to start programs for 5-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And they have to be really good programs. And then 15 years later, you'll get a gold medal. Mm-hmm. But I can't go get a bunch of 20-year-old girls and teach them how to get a gold medal in gymnastics in a year. I needed to meet that girl when she was 5. Right. And so you look at the entry lines, they're all lining up now for not football and not soccer. So you just go 15 years down the road, those sports are going to be emancipated. Mm-hmm. So I only got your 3 more. The reason we do the podcast for an hour is because, you live in the foothills and you work downtown, you got an hour commute. And they keep asking to do a podcast because they don't like the radio. News is toxic. I mean, I can't even watch news. It's so toxic. I mean, you listen to news in between ISIS and Afghanistan and Trump and Hillary, and it's just, I just hate it. And they're telling me in my office that they drive to work and they listen to news. It's half commercials and half toxic. But if they listen to a podcast on quilting or cooking or raising a family, they get to work and they feel great and they feel like they read a book all the way to work and they just love it. And podcasting has exploded. Like, we haven't even launched Tukeetown. And I mean, these podcasts are being downloaded 100 times a day. Just because if you go to iTunes and type in Ahwatukee, basically we're the only thing that comes up. So I want to ask the final question because we call it Dentistry Uncensored. I like to talk about controversy, what no one agrees on. And one of the biggest controversies I see in child raising, and I hear it a lot, well, my wife, she doesn't believe in spanking my kid. I swear to God, if I smacked his butt 5 times, he'd quit doing it. And his wife says, no violence. You get, so spanking, yes or no? Doctor?
Absolutely no.
Doctor? What, really? Absolutely no. I was not expecting you to say that.
The research is showing that children that were spanked are going to be more violent and more likely to use spanking as adults. Yes, absolutely no.
You hear that, Ryan? She said you're not allowed to spank your father.
Denise, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think spanking accomplishes anything. It doesn't teach a child, what to do instead of whatever behavior it is that you don't want them to do. And if somebody that you love and trust is kind of, coming at you, and not that it's abuse. I mean, I think a little swat is much different than, beating on a child, but still, that's somebody that child loves and trusts. And I think it's detrimental to their self-esteem if that happens. Whereas if your child does something that you don't like, that's a teachable moment, and that's when you need to, get them, tell them to stop. This is what you're doing. This is what I need you to do instead, and instead of just spanking and making them cry and.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is too, we were talking a lot about that connection, making connections, and you want to make a connection with your child. And if you're trying to teach your child that you can trust me, and then you spank them, you're teaching them that they cannot trust you. They cannot always trust you, and that's really hard for a child to understand. Well, at these times I can trust you, but these times I can't. They can't wrap their head around that. The problem is the child doesn't have emotional regulation yet. The ability to control their emotions. They get upset easily, right? They don't know how to talk about their feelings and solve conflicts. That takes time. We have to show them. We have to give them the words. We have to help them solve their conflicts by being there, being around to help them learn how to interact and what to say to their sister or to their friend. And what I've seen is a lot of parents are so busy, like they're saying, go off and play, and they're not showing them how to work through that conflict, that we need to be present, we need to be right nearby. And if we want them to clean up, we have to show them how to clean up. And here's something interesting that I just learned at a training. Do you know how many times it takes to learn something? How many times you have to be taught something or exposed to it before you actually can learn that?
I'm going to go with it. A lollipop is 3 licks.
3 times?
And then remember the commercial lollipop? How many licks are on level 3? I'm going with 3.
Okay. 2,000 times. So it takes 2,000 times before you can learn something. So think about a child. Like, if you say, oh, you know this, I've already told you this. Like, you think, they should know by now, but it takes a long, long time for a child to learn. Now that doesn't mean that we're not busy and that sometimes we can't, interact with them, because that happens. But we do the best that we can. So the more that we show them, the more that we give them the words, like say, I want that toy, I want a turn. Teaching them how to do it is what's going to make the difference.
Final question. I told you that was the last question. I have to go one overtime question. You look at the data. 1945, every woman had kids, and the average was 5.5 kids per family. Now you look at the 25% of women are not going to have children, and then the number went from 5.5 to 2.3. Mm-hmm. And then you look at Japan, and a third never had children, and the average, the rest had 0.9. So it's you kind of think that as you got a master's degree and a PhD, that a lot of people are like, man, having a kid is a big project. I mean, that's not like having a dog or a cat. That's a big project. I think I'm just going to pass. I mean, do you see more people saying, you know what, I got to give it to you? I mean, my mom and dad had 7 kids. I had 4. You see that downward shift in the number of kids, and in 1945, your average age for a first baby was 16, and now it's 27. So they're like, let me take a decade and think about this, and then instead of having 5, I'm thinking maybe 2, and a 4th they're saying I'll pass. Japan, it's a 3rd. It's kind of a lot. It's kind of overwhelming.
People are more educated. They're more purposeful. They're trying to make better choices. So they're waiting. They're taking time. They're thinking it through. I have lots of friends that have chosen not to have kids. Yeah.
Now, are those your smarter friends?
But they have chosen that life. Yeah.
I mean, I say it, and Ryan's here, I'll say it, but my 4 boys is the 4 best decisions I ever made. Mm-hmm. But it's the hardest damn job you'll ever love. Mm-hmm. God dang, it's hard. It's like, just imagine if you went out and adopted 4 puppies. Mm-hmm. And it's fun, it's playful, you love it, but it's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
And back another change in our day, 18, you were out of the house and gone. Mm-hmm. And now a third of millennials are still living at home because it's more competitive. Everything's so expensive. They got student loan debt.
Right.
It's really easy to find a $10 an hour job, but
Right.
it's really hard to find a $20 an hour job. But ladies, thank you so much for coming over and spending an hour with my homies on their commute to work. So they can find you at, what is your website?
www.godsgarden.com.
And it's affiliated with horizonchurch.com.
It is.
And will you send that pastor over?
I will.
I still think, schools, churches, that's the bedrock of Ahwatukee. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
over.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.